Rasa community, and it'll be a little bit before the stream catches up with us. I'm here today with Liam Morley, who is head of talent acquisition. Yep, I said that right. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about what it is that you do,
Sure.
Rasa
So
community, and it'll
my
be a little bit
main
before the stream.
role is to make sure that everything around folks joining Rasa and finding out how they can join Rasa and work for us, as well as like lots of projects around diversity, equity, inclusion, and how we make sure we hire folks from lots of different backgrounds. All of that is like encompassed in the talent acquisition team. And I lead that team. So we have lots of great people that will talk to all the great candidates that we get applying and reach out to people actively that we think might be great for different positions. But yeah, lots of interesting things. Basically, we speak to people all the time, which is great. I love doing that.
Uh, I would. I don't know what I was going to say there. I was something to the tune of, I think you're pretty good at it, and it's
Oh,
really nice to be able to interact with you.
yeah, yeah, cool.
So while we're waiting for questions to come in the chat, I'm going to ask you a question that I have that I get a lot, which is, okay, someone is interested in data science or software engineering and they want to get their first job. What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, this is the like $1 million question, right? I think there's a huge issue in tech at the moment, especially that I see with entry level roles and companies expecting people to have like 2 or 3 years experience, right? Like, which is
Yeah.
just ridiculous. So I think the biggest advice I give, I think not just people looking to get in for their first job, but like any job, is to be really deliberate. Figure out the companies you want to work for and why, and then go about your job search in the same way that you would when you were like looking for colleges. Like when you're looking where to go to college, you think about, okay, where do I want to go for certain reasons? It might be distance to your hometown, maybe you want to stay close to your parents, maybe you want to get away from them, and all of these things are the same with your job search. So think about what's important to you. You know,
Hmm.
are you interested in working for a company that is 5,000 people, has lots of processes, and you might have lots of super senior people around you? Like if that interests you, then figure out what industry you want to work in and who these companies are, and then find out who you need to talk to in those teams maybe. A great way that I think people do it when people reach out to me. Obviously, I get millions of messages every day, which is great, right? But I think what really stands out is when people have researched Rasa and they talk about it a bit, right? Like they stand out because they're excited about Rasa, which luckily for us happens a lot. But I think when people have gone out of their way to find things and then tell me about that, like I think that's really endearing. And then almost automatically, I go out of my way a little bit more to help that person. And luckily with Rasa, especially if you're like an engineer and we're open source, so you have a great opportunity to look under the hood, right? Try before you buy. You don't really get at most companies. So if somebody has like they really want to work at Rasa and they have done a bit of due diligence and they kind of reach out to me and like, hey Liam, like this is my experience. I love this about Rasa. Then I think that's a really great start. Um, it's not always easy to do that, and I
Mhm.
understand that people can be in a more desperate situation and maybe they need to find a job, right? I think about your situation right there and is it in your best interest to apply to 100 roles a day? Like that might be what you have to do at that moment, but to me, like that kind of signals that you don't really understand what you're looking for. You just
Mm.
blanket apply to 100 people and there's no like the same cover letter saying the same thing. and you're not really doing yourself any justice, I think. So definitely be really deliberate. Find where you want to work, think of the reasons why, and find the people that can make that happen, because they will. People in talent functions want to hire great people, and when you're junior, showing that you have a lot of initiative is actually a really good sign that you're going to do well and that you're going to learn loads. Yeah, that would be my advice, I think.
Yeah, I think that's solid advice. It's like I don't know, I went to graduate school, so I think about it a little bit like trying to figure out what graduate school to go to. And the advice I always get is like, well, where are they doing the research you want to be doing? But like, where are they doing the work that you want to be doing? If you have the luxury of time. Hi, Robbie. Liam Kettle, different Liam, says, would you say getting an internship is harder than a full-time job? Interested in the UX side, but still in a PhD program. UX being user experience for folks who aren't familiar with the.
I think it's hard to give a good answer. I think probably no. I know internships, especially in the US, are like really highly sought after. It's not as big a thing in some places in Europe. I think it can be tough to get into them. But I think again that's even more important to stand out, right? Like how can you make sure that you stand out? I think would be the important thing to do there. Also, what does an internship at that company add to your profile at that time? Are you taking an internship there just because it's, I don't know, Facebook or a company that is big and you think adds value? Again, with anything, break it down. What's your ultimate goal? Is it to work for, like at Rasa, a lot of our interns we hire as full-time staff because that's kind of the progression, right? Is you hire a great intern, you work with them, you find a like a communal balance, and then you hopefully sign that, hire that person full time. But yeah, I think there's definitely value in it. I think it can be tough. I think it depends, again, how deliberate you are and the company.
Yeah. Hope that answers your question, Liam. And something that was helpful for me that might be relevant for the other Liam Kettle, in trying to transition from academia to industry was having a lot of public facing skills where I wrote about my research in a very digestible way, so it wasn't just for other researchers, which helps me a lot, obviously, perhaps not obviously, in my current role as a developer advocate. So it might be helpful to talk about your research in a more of public facing way, if you have like a blog or something. I know that's like more work on top of the PhD program and trying to get an internship, but being, I have found, especially in my role, being visible online. I don't know, Liam, do you think, I will say, like, caveat here, a big part of my job is being visible online. That's like the way I do developer advocacy, that's an important part of it. Would you say that being very visible online is good or helpful? I see you making a thinking face.
Yeah, 100%. I think that I'm a big Twitter advocate. I think I've like found a lot of great people on social media. I know there's like a lot of people getting joy with Clubhouse right now. Like I think being visible, being visible is great, right? There's actually a lot of people that have built followings online that have got multiple jobs and multiple offers from that. And the trick is to add value, right? Add value to somebody. If you can do that, then you can build some sort of following, and then it's definitely going to help you. I think actually with academia, I think there's I think it's really interesting seeing when you actually or how you go about getting experience in industry, right? Because if you are in academia for an extended period of time, when do you make that switch into industry? And if you don't have an internship and you're doing your, you know, your postdoc, whatever, you don't have an internship and then you're applying to go into industry, that can sometimes be like a big jump. It can be a bit of a culture shock, actually.
Mm. Yeah, that's I would say. I mean, the nice thing about being an NLP is that I knew a lot of people in industry, so I could talk to them about their you know, various ways of being in the world and the work, what it was like to do their job. But definitely not everyone's going to have that resource. Another question from Liam: what is the best way to be visible? Twitter, LinkedIn, vlogs?
Good question. I am not a huge fan of LinkedIn. And maybe that's against every recruiter that spends all day on LinkedIn. I think it is super biased platform that, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of. So I would not say LinkedIn, but that's just my personal preference. I have had my best interactions and got the most value from Twitter. So I would say that. I think it depends what your, you know, what kind of role you're looking for. If you're looking to be a UX researcher full time, then perhaps it's about your portfolio and your research and your blog and you know how you structure that research, and perhaps that, like, it's really important for you to have a website and to have that behind you. Um, I but I actually find Twitter for networking is really great. I save a lot of tweets and I find a lot of things that I do or things that I talk about at Rasa, actually a lot of that comes from there. So I think it's just like a great, you know, fountain of knowledge, really.
I am also a big fan of Twitter. Um, Robbie mentions Instagram as well, which I don't think of Instagram as like a place where people do professional things around. I think like Instagram as a professional platform is more for artists. At least that's my interaction with it. That could work. Also, I do know that a lot of data science folks are getting into TikTok now. So I guess if you wanted to make like machine learning TikToks, there's a community for you.
So we had an employer branding meeting yesterday, and a couple of the folks in the team were talking about TikTok. And there, you're right. There is, you know, there is content out there. I think you can use any platform. Social media is just such a powerful tool. Personally, I think there are lines that should be drawn on professional network and private network. So I don't have Facebook, for example, but if someone wrote to me for a job on Facebook, I might think like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And I kind of feel the same about Instagram a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Twitter is a professional, like it's a news source, right? So it's like more of a professional networking site. LinkedIn is obviously a professional networking site. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not sure having, depending on what you're looking to do, but I'm not sure having like an Instagram following would help recognize if you're, say, working in.
Maybe a designer. I've definitely seen some designers
Yeah,
on Instagram, sorry,
yeah.
where they're like, "Look at my beautiful designs." Uh, yeah, but I would also say like, I as someone who does a lot of social media, I think the most important thing in terms of building up, uh, a community on social media is like what Liam said, um, build value, and that could just be like you read something interesting and you're like, hey, I read something interesting, you might like it, here's a link. It might be, I think Kareem Carr is a really good example of somebody whose value a lot of the times is technical content and a lot of times is dumb jokes, which is fun, right? That works on Twitter. But what I would not do is start a Twitter, tweet once, and then like 3 months later tweet 5 times in a row and then never tweet again, because that feels, um, if you are using it as professional development, and I would say important. So I would say I try to tweet I don't know, a couple times a week. I used to tweet a lot more, but now that I have more followers, I'm like, do I really want to put this on like everybody's feed and like be in their bubble? Like, hey, 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 listen about this. This is cool. So I'm a little bit more. Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier about finding the companies that you're really interested in and that you want to work for. So now that I'm in a tech job, I hear about a lot of companies all the time. But before that, I didn't really like. I knew about like the large tech companies and like the startups that my friends worked at, and like nothing else. So how do you find out about tech companies?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult one as well. I think it depends where you're based and what the tech ecosystem is like there. So, if you're in one of the major cities, then probably, you're going to find out about companies because you have groups or friends or communities, or you go to a meetup somewhere. Um, but I think with anything, it's research, right? There's plenty of places like publications that you can subscribe to, and kind of figure out who has maybe raised money, so might be growing. Um, I think one way to think about your job search, depending on what's important to you, but if I was going back to when I started my career, I would maybe be looking for a company that shared the same values as me. So perhaps then I would look for a newsletter or a group that kind of spoke to me, like resonated with me with that. So whatever thing is important to you, like I would maybe look at that, because then that might push you into one company more than another. I think when you're a lot of the like real junior people that I speak to usually come from like referrals as well. We get a lot of people that come from referrals. I think companies are, I mean, there's jobs posted and plastered everywhere, and there's a bunch of websites that scrape jobs from everywhere, and they're not always helpful because they're not always, live or what have you. But I think it's all about research, and again, be deliberate. You can have a super simple Google search of companies in this industry in this city, and you will get a list of companies, or there'll be news clippings, or there'll be something. Um, but I think when you when you are really early in your job search, I think you should also think about, like, then the next stage is thinking about what's truly important to you about this company. So, you've had like 10 interviews, and then you end up getting 2 offers, and you're like, this is great. But it can be really easy to then, after doing all of that work, searching Google, talking to all of your friends, texting them like, hey, what companies do you know about? What's going on? And you get an offer, and it can be very easy to just accept the first thing. It could be, um, a lot of companies just expect to hire junior people almost like on a conveyor belt, So then that's probably the most important part. Then is how do you qualify the company? How do the shoes on the other foot? Then you've done all the searching and you've shown that you're amazing. How do you then make sure that you're making the correct decision in what is super important? Your first role in industry is such a big decision, and it can make or break you, especially in a certain industry. Maybe you start as an engineer and you have a really bad experience and it puts you off. Yeah, there's like, unfortunately, searching for a job is a really tough thing, especially at the moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we we opened a new position in my team for the US like last week, and had like 180 folks apply, and people with like 35 years recruitment experience, and they're director of vice president of XYZ, so way overqualified for the position. And I think, that's also shines a light on what's kind of going on at the moment. So in a job search situation, I think sometimes if you are lucky enough to take the pressure off, then then that's great. It's all well and good me giving you all this advice from a very privileged position of having a job, right? But I
Mm.
think there are still things that you should do to protect yourself, and making sure that you choose the right company is just so high up there, I think.
Yeah, I would. I mean, something that I definitely like look at is, um, especially as like a white woman. So like clearly I'm only getting part of this situation, but like I look at like leadership and like how long people have been there, and like if the only women who are in the company have been there for like 6 months, that sets off some alarm bells for me. Or if like if all the minority folks that are in the company have been there for like a very small amount of time, and like I'm digging around, I'm like, oh, people leave this company kind of quickly. Hmm, that's a little bit of a red flag. So that's something that I look for, when I'm considering a position. Fortunately, there are places where it is unpleasant to work. Raz is
This is
not one of those places.
no, it's not. We promise. No, it's. I think it's a real harsh reality. That people struggle to find jobs, and they take one, and then after 3 months, it's horrible. And you work all this time, and you celebrate, and you tell your friends and your family you've got this amazing job, and then all of a sudden, it's just not what it says on the tin. I,
Mm.
I I actually caught up with one of the folks that we hired a few months ago yesterday, and I said to her that I always have this like really happy feeling when we hire someone at Rasa, not just because we've hired someone great, but because I know that in a few months when I catch up with them, like they will say, "Oh, I love Rasa, it's so great," and which is really nice. I know that they're not going to come to me and say, "Having a really horrible time. Why did you do this to me?" I think it's
And
cool.
that's, I mean, that's very much that's like the culture of the company, but also like sometimes you're just not as good a fit for a position as you thought you would be, or as the person hiring you thought you would be. And this has happened to, a lot of really great data scientists I know who were the first data scientists of the company, and the company did not know what they wanted. And what they really needed was a data engineer, and what they got was a machine learning PhD who was like, all right, I'm ready to model for you. But the data is in like such a state of disarray that they're just building data pipelines, and the company's like, where's the models? And they're like, I cannot give you the thing that you want, just because this disconnect between expectations and like the situation. So I'll say, when people have a bad time at a company, it is not always because of their culture problems. Uh, Ned wants to know: is it important to have side projects during your PhD program to prepare your portfolio for when you want to transition to industry? My answer to this would be no. When I was putting together my portfolio, I turned my CV to a portfolio basically, and every research project I was like, here's what I did, here was the timeline, here were the outcomes, here was like the steps that we took. Because I know that something that employers nervous about PhDs that sometimes we're a little bit slow. We're very methodical and thorough, which is not always the most important thing when you're trying to get, a proof of concept ready. So that's what I did, and I didn't do a whole lot of side projects. It was all mostly like stuff directly related.
Yeah, I think there's um, this real bad trend that people think that your GitHub and how green it is how likely you are to get a job, right? I mean, I I would say very rarely, very rarely does any of the engineers or any of my team like dive into a side project somebody has done in in the recruitment process. I very highly doubt it. Also, people have jobs and lives and families, and it's definitely not a bad thing. Like if you're doing a PhD and you're worried about having to also do extra work, and you have to like look after yourself as a human, like you have to make sure that you're in the right space mentally and have time for all the other things. Like just I honestly wouldn't worry about that. Like Rachel said, you can turn things work that you have already done, you can repurpose it. um and I think that's way more important, than how many side projects you have, and how much you hustle. on the side.
I am a fan of the working all the time culture because I think it chews people up and spits them out, and don't like that. Wolf says, big fan. Oh, well, thank you. Hitash says, love for Raza. Love for Hitash, thank you. Uvara Khan, apologies if the vowels were wrong in that, says, what would you suggest to someone aspiring to make a switch from the machine learning industry to academia, a PhD program in? I mean, I'm gonna take this one, Liam. I don't know, did you go to grad school?
Me?
Hmm?
No.
Good decision.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've been in industry for a while, I'm assuming that you know what you're doing, right? That you're like, yeah, no, what I really want to do is research and I want to get into a PhD program. So I would say coming from industry is no bad thing. The biggest problem that I see with application materials for PhD programs, again, is people not doing the thing that Liam mentioned about doing with a company. Like, know what you want to research specifically. And Europe and the US work a little bit different. So in the US, you basically come with your research program and you work on it, and you want something that is related to but not exactly the same as what your potential advisor would be working on. In Europe, I think it's a little bit more common for your research to be part of an already funded grant that has a specific scope. So if you're applying in Europe, I would look for what grants are funded, and they're going to need PhDs for. And if you're applying in the US, I would have like a really clear idea of what you want to do. And you don't have to do that thing necessarily, but like you're like, all right, I want to work on, reinforcement learning and applying it to welfare in some way. I don't know, whatever it is that you're really, really interested in, applications or the like theoretical area that you want to work in and who's working in that area, and then read their papers. And if you can, talk to their current graduate students or people who have left the program that they are advising in, either by just like noping out or by finishing and getting their degree, and get an idea of the student culture there. Yeah, that would be my recommendation. That helps. Um, so I have another question for you, Liam. What would you recommend? So I'm thinking of a problem, and I'm hoping you can give folks suggestions. So when you see these job ads that are like, oh, 24 years of Hadoop experience or something ridiculous like that, how much of, like, at what point? Because the advice I've always been given is to ignore, like, if you have some of the bullet points, go ahead and apply. Like, at what degree do you want to stop ignoring bullet points? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think so. On Rasa job posts, we have like a section that says, this is kind of who we think would be good for this role, but like if you feel like that's you, then apply. And I think
Let me pull one up.
I think that it can be really soul destroying if you're trying to match like pound for pound your experience with what's in a job specification, right? Because depending on how you think about or how the hiring team think about a job description, well, first of all, it depends on who writes it. So at Rasa, hiring managers and their team write the job description because they are the folks that understand day to day of what's going on. And then, but at times we'll have like a big list of like, this is what we'd like somebody to do, and then you have to whittle it down to, okay, what's realistic and what do we really need this person to do? So I would say that if you know that the role is in your realm of capability, and you think that you have the skills, or then I would write a really amazing cover letter. So here, I think it's up a little bit. Yeah, so just above about you. There you go. Above about you. So in italics. Yeah, please keep in mind we're describing the background we imagine would be the best fit. So even if you don't meet all the requirements, you're confident you're up for the task, we absolutely want to get to know you. And I think if everybody goes into their search like that, I think it doesn't hurt. I mean, what's the worst that happens is that you maybe get a rejection letter or an email. Like, that's the worst thing that happens. Nobody, you know, the world doesn't end. It's just, it's a rejection. And ultimately, the rejection can be for multiple things. It might not be because you don't fully fit this role. You know, so if that is happening, if you're applying for lots of positions that are very varied, then maybe again think about how you can be more deliberate with your job search. For example, there might be a couple of things on a software engineer job description that maybe I could think that I could do, but I'm not going to apply for a back-end software engineering role because I think they'd find me out pretty quickly. So, so I think there's also being, realistic. I think if you're applying for a role, you don't have all of the bullet points, like definitely apply. And if you don't have them, then in your cover letter, talk about why you applied for the role, why you think you're great, how your experience may be more relevant. I think unfortunately there are a lot of things in hiring that are broken, fortunately, and there are a lot of companies, a lot of teams that repurpose job specifications and kind of can throw them up, and that can really put people off. And my advice is, if you think you can do the job, would be to apply.
Yeah. Bold.
Yeah, go for it. Exactly. I mean, if it's something you really want to do, then perhaps the company will give you some great feedback about why you weren't right. Or perhaps if you apply for the same title, the same role at 5 different companies and you're rejected from all of them, then perhaps have a look at what you might be able to do to maybe get closer to that role. Maybe it's not the right position. Maybe you're applying for a senior role and you don't quite have that experience, or so yeah, go for it is my advice.
And I would also say that, at least in my experience, it is more important that you have a general understanding of the tasks that you'll be doing day to day than that the exact type of tooling that they're using. So like if about machine learning and like you're applying to a place and they use, let's say, MATLAB, like, yeah, it's going to be a learning curve to get good with MATLAB, but your like general understanding of how to design machine learning experiments and like how different models work is going to be applicable, even if maybe you don't know the software tool. Okay. General advice. Martina says, do the hiring involve international applicants too, or is it restricted to European nationalities? So I'm assuming this is about our roles. Back up.
Yeah, so we're remote first as a company. If you are relocate, or so what remote first means to us is that we have like 3 entities. So in the US, in Germany, and in the UK. So you can work in one of those, like under one of those umbrella companies. So if, for example, you are a European citizen and living in Paris, then you would probably have to relocate to like maybe Germany, because the UK is no longer in the EU. That's a whole other show. But I mean, ultimately, we hire people from all over the place. Our aim is to have a company that has people from all sorts of backgrounds. And to do that, you have to hire people from as many places as you can, really. So if you want to relocate, then we help do that. But you would need to work in either the UK, Germany, or the US, just because we're still super small. We're only like 73 people, and it's a lot of it's quite hard to have. I mean, it's a big task to be able to hire people in any country in the world. The big distributed companies that can do that, like GitLab, hire people as freelancers. But all of this is something that we will do at Rasa as we grow. But right now you'd have to be in one of those locations. But you'd still be working remotely, you know, which I know is super important to folks. I think rightly so. As soon as we went remote first, my eyes lit up at all the lovely locations that I could go and work from, and then maybe not at the moment, but hopefully when the world opens up, that can happen again. So there's plenty of positives to being remote first.
Definitely. And I will say that time zones, I think, are another reason for where people are physically. This is at my last job. Some of my colleagues were in Australia, and I'm on the west coast of the United States, and that is a rough time distance. It is not easy to navigate. We're waiting for the next question. I have something that I don't know. I don't know that. Okay, so two things on this. I'm organizing my thoughts before I say some things. So job titles. So the two things are, one, sometimes you can be doing the exact same work with two different job titles. So in that way, maybe job titles aren't that important. On the other hand, I know that early on in my career, I had an offer for a job that would have been a technical program manager or technical project manager. And if I had taken that job, I don't think I'd be where I am now, because I would have gotten to the project manager career ladder. So, Martina wants to know about non-EU applicants.
Non-EU applicants can relocate to Germany and work anywhere in Germany, and we sponsor. We can't sponsor in the UK yet because that is a whole other situation, and also in the US because we're not a big enough company in the US really to sponsor. And there's a whole other host of problems with that. But if you're a non-EU citizen, then you can move to Germany and work anywhere that you like.
Hopefully that I'll see that. Well, I won't see it. It's not my job. But so I guess my question is, how important are job titles? Because on one hand, they're kind of like just words on paper, but on the other hand, they can really shape your career.
Yeah. So this is like, I think there's two completely different worlds here in the US and in Europe. So in the US, wow, the job titles, like senior lead, vice president, manager, 2 of software engineering. Like, what does that mean? I don't. So I think that job titles make a difference because I think for the company that you're working at. So at Rasa, a job title, say a leadership title, can mean that you have certain responsibilities. And you kind of want to position yourself, at the correct level for that company. So what I mean by that is a senior software engineer that's working in a 20-person startup may not be a senior software engineer at a 1,000-person scale up. So I think it definitely varies company to company, which doesn't really help. I think say I'm like outwardly sourcing, looking for a candidate, job titles aren't something I really care about. It's more the skills and the things that they've done, the meat on the bones, because I think a lot of people have inflated titles, and they might not necessarily be doing the work that, maybe they're leading certain part of a function, but perhaps they have somebody above them that's really making all the strategic moves, and this person is out there kind of putting things into application, right? And perhaps then I go looking for the strategic person, and I try and hire the person that's been out there doing and making and building. That's the wrong profile. So I think short answer, if there is one, job titles are all over the place. They are a bad science and they are very, very hard to compare. I think about, or it's a good question for any company you're interviewing at. You know, what do titles mean to you? Um, because I mean, ultimately, only people that have worked at a company, for example, like Amazon, have like millions of titles, right? And you have like recruiter one, two, three, you know, all these different titles. Like I don't understand what they all mean. But a person that works at Amazon has. So for me, that doesn't mean anything. It's more about what you've done and you know your experience. Um, I also think that some companies try and repurpose lots of different tasks under an ambiguous title, you know, to try and get away with maybe one person doing two jobs. So, you know,
Mm.
I think there's a lot I have a lot of issues with job titles and it makes it difficult because some people won't apply to jobs even at Rasa because they think it's a different role, you know. If you're looking for a job, it's all about you know the job spec. What does it say that you're doing? What is it about this role? You know, what kind of background does it say that you ideally have? Um, yeah, it's a tough one.
Uh, Question from Martina. Python developer versus machine learning engineer, which title would you say has a larger scope in the long run? I mean, I would say if someone's looking for a Python developer, I have no idea what they're going to be doing day to day, right? You could be building web pages, you could be backend stuff, you could be doing machine learning. Like Python does a lot of things, whereas machine learning engineer says to me will be um, building and productionizing models. I think the tasks that you could be doing are narrower, like as a engineer.
Yeah, I think they're two completely different jobs. I think. Um, so I think it would depend on what you wanted to get out of it. You know,
Mm.
what you wanted to do. But I think they're you know definitely two very different jobs. Maybe a Python engineer is somebody that might be working closely with or like maybe working on a machine learning product and they're working closely with the team, but maybe are not building models or you know they're not productionizing anything. So I think it's two very different things. I think.
And I would just thinking of your long-term development, career development as an engineer, I would be a little bit nervous about tying myself very deeply in one language or one framework and then I mean like I have a lot of experience in R. Rasa is not an R shop. I do not use it that much. Like I mean I use it from time to time when I need it, but if I'd just been like I will only work on R projects, I wouldn't be here. So yeah, I mean I don't think Python's going anywhere and I don't think R is going anywhere, but again I think the thing that you are doing is more important than the
And actually, I think kind of on that, when I think about this role that we have up here, the software engineer, backend engineer role, you know, it's not massively important that you are, you know, amazing at Python. You have lots of Python experience, even though our backend has a lot of Python, right? That's not super important. We are more interested or as interested in people that have experience in other object-oriented programming languages and actually people that like to experiment and people that find the best tool for that situation. And if you just are really siloed into one language or one tool or you know you're always just using the newest thing because that's cool and that's what I want to do. I think sometimes you can go down a sticky path where perhaps if a Python engineer applied to a role at Rasa, maybe that person's right, maybe not. My first question would be, oh, like what other languages do you have experience in, or would you be open to using? Yeah.
so I hope that helps. Mayan, if I'm saying that incorrectly, said, "Would you like to hire a person having experience in numerous fields like Python development, and analysis, DevOps, and NLP, or someone having experience in the field. So how valuable is it to have a breadth of experience?
Um, Really depends on the company size. I think company size has a big role to play there. If you're at a small startup, it can be a really good thing to be a jack of all trades. And this is like the life cycle of a company. I think when you're, a lot of the folks that start at a company maybe start to leave when it gets to a certain point because your role changes so much. So, if you love being scrappy and jumping around on all different types of technologies and skill sets, and maybe you're, doing some, maybe you're doing some deployment one day, you're doing some DevOps stuff, some Kubernetes, and then the next day you're working with a machine learning team on building some models. Like maybe if you love doing that, like a smaller company is more suited. As the company grows, you become a lot more specialized because you're working in a siloed team, and that team has one specific goal, and you're hired to help them achieve that goal. So having a really varied background there may not necessarily be the way to go. And I mean that. So thinking of Rasa, we're like, just over 70 people now, and it would depend what team that you join, right? Because our research team, our engineering teams, like they're two completely different sized teams, working on very, very different things. So I think, again, it's really about what company you want to work for, like what your goal is in your career. If you're like, it's never a bad thing to know like a few different things, but if you just have a high level understanding of a bunch of tasks, then you might fail at a bigger company. I mean, it may be at a smaller company as well. I think having too high a level understanding is can sometimes be detrimental. But yeah, figure out what's right for you. Figure out what kind of company you want to work for. I would say it's always worth. You don't need to be an expert in something, but I would say if you want to know all of these tasks, I would still have one or two things that are like your bread and butter. This is the thing I'm really good at, but I do these other things as well. Like that's never a bad thing, I think.
Question mark. Anna says, what would you suggest for a person with a title like developer make a transition to a successful machine learning engineer? What self-development skills do they need to cultivate to make progress here? Any regular upskills, or do we have to update to keep on par with ML counterparts? Oh, machine learning is a little bit rough. Well, I shouldn't say it's rough. It's exciting, right? But it's a field that's moving very quickly, where there is not, like, if someone says, I am a software engineer, you expect that they know a certain set of things, right? That they probably know about object-oriented programming, that they probably know about functional programming, they know how to write tests, they know about test coverage, they know about version control, right? There's like a certain set of skills that you're like, of course a software engineer knows this. For machine learning, like, I have talked to machine learning engineers who don't know about statistical distributions, very junior ones, but I would consider that like a core machine learning skill to know about statistical distributions. And these folks got hired and are doing fine without it. And things are changing very, very quickly in the field as a whole. Like even in NLP, right? 2017, when I graduated grad school, like transformers were brand new. Everyone was doing bidirectional STMs with attention. That was what you did. Now, 4 years later, some people are still working with RNNs, and I think that it's important to know when to use each tool, but like now it's all into transformers, and who knows what's going to come down the pipeline next. So just being in machine learning, you've got to at least keep up with what people are doing at the sort of high level research, but also know like about model evaluation and like basic experimentation. Like, how do you know which model is doing better at the task? And how do you know if a task is something you can do machine learning on at all. So there's like the sort of fundamental understanding of, you know, what machine learning can do. And then there's that broader understanding, or the more specialized understanding of like the specific models that are current, and then the tool sets around them, because those change really quickly as well. Um, but I don't know, I'm sure you can talk more on them, but I would say that like what a machine learning engineer knows is not as codified as like what a database administrator knows. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole field of machine learning is so very. I mean, a machine learning engineer, how many different roles can you think could come under the umbrella of machine learning engineer, right? There's an ever ending amount of tasks that you could be expected to do as an ML engineer. Um, Again, like be specialist, like decide what you want, what area of machine learning you want to focus on, what do you want to work on because you're passionate about it. Um, Obviously machine learning is hot and everybody wants to be an ML engineer. This happens loads. We have a bunch of folks apply to our engineering roles that say, yeah, like I'd like to be an engineer for a year, but I'm really joining you because I want to be an ML engineer, right? Which doesn't always happen. I think really look at what you want to specialize in, what area really interests you, and then if it really interests you, then there's plenty of research that you can do, and there's plenty of. I mean, you have like thinking of Rasa, like we're at the bleeding edge of an industry, right? In a sector that doesn't really exist, and so there's always new things happening all the time. So you have to be kind of ears to the ground, thinking what's the next thing that's happening, what's the next pivot, and just when you get up to speed with something else happens and we have to change again. I think it's hard. It can be hard to do a pivot, but I think if you're really passionate about it and it's something that you really want to do, there's lots of ways that you can go about doing that. There's plenty of groups that you can get like mentorship from folks, which I think can really help.
And I think the most fundamental question that will help you start specializing is, what type of data do you care about? Like, do you care about sensor data? Do you care about video or images? Do you care about text? Like, what do you look at and you're like, oh, sort of interesting, I want to learn more about that? Because they're very different. Martina says, would you prefer to hire a person working on a product-based environment or a service-based environment or in a startup?
Good question. Depends on the role. We definitely like to hire people that have worked at product companies because we are a product company and it can be a very different mindset. So, for example, if you're applying for the senior software engineer role, to use that one example, we would want you to have some sort of experience of a product lifecycle. A lot of our engineers have product mindset, right? They understand the whole process. And if you're just experiencing, you've just experienced one part of that, or if you work for a consultancy and you only go in and see small parts of it, sometimes that's not the best transition to working in a product company like Rasa. So I would say product company focus would be great. I mean, that doesn't help if all product companies only hire people from product companies, because then the bar to entry is pretty high. So yeah, I mean, that's something that is important to us, but again, it depends on seniority, really. I mean, we don't expect everyone that we hire to have had experience at a product company.
That helped, Martina. And I think that comes back to what you said before, and like, know, learning about the places you want to work and what sort of they do.
Yeah, for sure. I think we are at Rasa, we're in a very unique position, as I mentioned earlier, that, we're open source and people can jump in and have a look at what's going on. They can join the community. They can, watch some of our YouTube videos. They can do all this cool stuff. Can't always do that at some companies. So it's really important that you pull that information out of the team. It's important that you ask those questions, and I think when you're thinking about a company, when you're going through an interview process, like, I think the further you go through the process, like, the more there should be a shift that happens, where at the start you're already trying to impress and you're telling them all these great things about you. As you go through the process, you should be pulling more and more information out of the company, and you should be grilling them a lot more. I think I always try and leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end of an interview for people to ask me questions, because I love answering questions about Rasa. And I really want people to ask me lots of things. Why did I join Rasa? What's good about it? What's bad about it? And these are all questions that you should definitely be asking, all the time. This is a super, super important part of any search, of any process, of anything. It's not just you showing that you're right for the job, but it's the company, showing to you that they are the right match for you as well.
My preferred question at that stage of the interview is, if you could change one thing about your work, what would it be? Then I get a good understanding. Like, sometimes people just like pause for a real long time and are like, oh no, it's chill. And sometimes they pause for a real long time and you can see the list ticking down and you're like, there's a lot of things you change. Huh, that's interesting. So I think that's helpful for getting a situation. And obviously it is very rough in a job market where there's a lot of applicants, not a lot of roles, but I don't know, I think it's good to remember that people are hiring because they need someone to do the work. And if you are being interviewed, it's likely that you have the skills to do that work, and that, your skills and time and expertise are valuable, even if you're at a junior level. So don't discredit yourself and value that. Martina says, at Rasa, do you provide any mentoring for starters trying to grasp the fundamentals of machine learning and grow to an expertise?
Good question. Yes. So thinking of engineering, we're actually building this in research now. We have a framework that you can, with kind of skills that we attribute to what we would expect from somebody at a certain level. So you can very easily see if there are gaps in your skill set and where you excel. I think one thing I love about Rasa is the amount of internal promotions for such a small company. I mean, I think 80% of our leadership team all have been at Rasa and have been promoted into the leadership team. And all of that is because there's a really good culture of learning. So, everybody that's hired at Rasa, we have a culture interview where we look at people that are a culture ad. And part of that culture is people wanting to knowledge transfer. We would much rather hire somebody that's more junior for a role, but they, really want to learn and they really want to help people maybe more junior than them. And we would hire a super senior machine learning engineer that just wants to, sit away, turn off all communication, build their models, never talk to anyone, and just do their job. And they may do that really well, but that's not a skill set that makes you successful at Rasa. So I think it's a really good environment for junior people, mid-level people, senior people. We think a lot about how you can progress and where you can progress. It's a conversation we have all the time. And I think that should happen at any seniority. That shouldn't just happen because you're junior. I am head of talent acquisition and I have a leadership coach that Rasa pay for that helped me to become better in my job. So just because I'm, leading my function, that doesn't mean learning stops and I only help my team. So I think it's important to do all the way down the line, any seniority, CEO, right the way down to intern. I think it's super important.
Dominic has a question. What were the main reasons that you two joined Rasa? Gonna go first, Liam?
Yeah, great question. So I one of the main reasons I joined Rasa was the founders, Alex and Alan. So I have, I think a small company, you have a lot of access to the founders, and like founders and leadership team, just because of their title, they have a lot of their the way they hold themselves, the way they interact, the things they believe in can be really positively affect or really negatively affect the company. So for me, when I met Alex and Alan, it was really important to figure out what kind of company they wanted to build because that was what I was interested in. And after meeting them, I was super excited that I knew Rasa was going to be, a really inclusive place. I knew they were really bought into recruitment and they understood the value of helping me find lots of amazing folks. And I think that's really important. So that was the main reason I joined in the first place. And then there was a bunch of reasons why I stayed.
Me, I think the thing that made me talk in the first place was the product, because I'm a big open source nerd, so I love working on open source projects. And when I used it for the first time, like every time I ran into something, I was like, oh, I would do it this way. It had been done that way and like better than I would have done it. So like just like as someone in NLP and in machine learning, I was like, yeah, they're making extremely like solid product decisions that really exceed my expectations. I was like, okay, I'll chat. And then the thing that really clinched it for me was really talking to different people on the team, talking to different people from, I mean, I recommend that you do this before you take a position, but like talking to people in my network, and I was like, hey, you heard of this company? What's the 411? And getting a good like understanding. I noticed that like people tended to join and stay, which especially at a very early stage startup is, especially very early startups, you can sometimes see a lot of churn, and I didn't see that, and I was like, okay, that's signal. And it was really talking with everybody and talking about what they did and then what they valued and how the company values really strongly reflected in, like genuinely reflected in people's day-to-day work and what they did. And that clinched it for me. And also I asked, because a lot of the sort of competing products only support a couple of languages, and I was like, okay, so how many human languages do you support? And I think I was talking with Alan in this discussion. He was like, well, we have support for like the spacey languages, but we know that it's important and we're constantly working on it, and we want that Rasa works for everybody. And I was like, all right, yeah, we're not just gonna like pick the Tamil speakers out in the cold and be like, you speak English now, because that's what our product supports. Um, Not that anyone has ever said that to me directly who works at another of our competitors. Sometimes it feels that way with big products. So yeah, I think those were my main reasons. Martina says, thanks for your responses. I hope they were helpful for you. Karen says, you hire people outside the US or Europe? If not, why not? I'm South American. Do I have a chance?
Good question. I kind of broached the subject a little bit earlier. The main reason that we couldn't, for example, hire you and you work in South America is because we don't have a legal entity there. And to hire you, would have to do it through a third party company. And they are a lot of paperwork. I mean, if you imagine all of the different legal structures in every country around the world, like it varies a lot. We have one people manager, and she has a lot of work to do. So it would be very difficult for us to support people in every country. It's something we talk about a lot because, of course we want to hire people anywhere, right? Like we're remote first and we want people to be able to work from wherever they can do their job. We don't believe you have to be in an office to do your best work, right? But I think for the size of the company that we are right now, it doesn't make sense for us to put in place all of this infrastructure and go through all of this stuff. That is probably more realistic if we're 3 times the size of company. Um, so it's unfortunate. It would make my job a lot easier if we could find people everywhere. Um, but if you're in South America and you wanted to relocate, you could come to Germany where we can sponsor, if that's an option for you. But yeah, I mean, for the moment, that's the best we can do, really, which is a pain. But we're definitely working on it. It's always on our to do conversations in the people team for sure.
Yeah, it's not like the oh my gosh. Sorry, my dog would also like to hire people from South America, it turns out. It's not like all the best engineers are in Silicon Valley. That's ridiculous. There's great engineers everywhere. Or like people for other roles as well. Dominic wants to know, Liam, what's your favorite interview question to get to know someone?
I like super open interview questions. So I like to ask people to tell me their story. That's what I like because I think it's really open and it allows me to understand what people think is important about their job, their profile so far. Um, it can lead to varying answers back to people telling me about their very early childhood, which is great, to having just telling me what they did in their last role, and that's also fine. I like every interview to be a conversation. Like I don't like to just have like lists of questions of questions of questions. But I think that one usually gets a conversation going. I can usually then pick up a few interesting um, questions from that.
Yeah, and there's also something that you said earlier that I think might be. Oh, we have more questions, so I don't want to go on too great of a digression. But you mentioned culture add, and usually people talk about culture fit. Do you want to discuss that a little
Sure.
bit?
Sure. So I think culture fit really means that everyone that you hire is the same, right? They fit in, and I think that that's not a great mindset to be in. I think when I think of culture at Rasa, I think of people adding a different perspective. That's like a big deal when looking to hire people from varied backgrounds. It's important that somebody looks at a problem from a different perspective. And it's something actually I really value, even in recruitment, is having conversations with other people at Rasa that look at recruitment from a completely different angle and give me a completely different outlook on it. I think that's super important. So if like we just hired people that fit in, then we would end up with a bunch of folks that had pretty similar backgrounds and pretty similar viewpoints. I think so. We're um we make sure that we say culture add rather than culture fit.
Yeah, I like that distinction. Uh, sorry, my dog has lots of opinions right now. Um, Other questions. Uh, oh, Karen says Rasa source code is some of the most interesting code I've ever studied. Congrats to the devs. And Karen, thanks for the. Well, thank you, Karen. On the source code comment to the chat. Uh, Omar says, "Oh wow, we got a bunch of questions. We are. Let's see, we're a little bit over time. Do you have more time?
I
I don't
have
want to keep
time.
you too late."
No, it's okay.
Omar says, I got a barky baby. I have a question. For example, if I want to create a login to my chatbot, is there any way to handle that jQuery AJAX to submit the request to a custom action? I have no idea. It sounds like something you'd want to build a custom connector for. I would search on the Rasa forums. I got a little animation theory. There we go. I would search on the Rasa forums. There's the URL, and see if somebody else has discussed it previously. And if not, I'd ask a question. Akil. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Also, if anyone ever wants to type in their name in IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, I will probably do a slightly better job reading it. Mikhail says, I used to use Dialogflow. Now that I've chosen Rasa, how much will it benefit me? Just like a quick answer to that. I think Dialogflow can be a little bit faster to get proof of concept built, but the number of things that you can do with it is a little bit more limited. So if you have a use case and you want a lot of customization, Rasa can help with that. And also, you can, because we don't have like exact templates that are followed every time, our example conversations data, you won't need to do as much writing down or clicking through in Dialogflow the specific things that happen in a specific order. So if you have a lot of conversations and they're very complex, we might end up saving you time. Oh. Chris says, Rasa's team looks like the best team ever. I've never seen the team that puts as much effort as you guys into both the product and the Jax. You can make us laugh. Oh, thank you, Chris. There we go. Role known number says lots of companies are giving assignments to build a chatbot with an API and other basic functions to filter out candidates during the initial stage. And I got stuck as there are lots of resources in 1.0. Yes, we definitely hear you. The masterclass in particular is in 1.0. The last video of the masterclass discusses the differences between 1.0 and 2.0, so that might be a good thing to check out. Sorry, there's somebody, they're cleaning the hallway apartment, and my dog is not having it. He wants them to know that this is his territory. Yeah, and we should have, oh yeah, the API bit I don't think is built up a whole bunch, but the, yeah, if you keep an eye on the space, we'll be creating more content at 2.0. And Karen says, I come from the Linux kernel community, and it blows my mind the work that Rasa does for FOSS. And from such a friendly, collaborative place. Thank you. That's, I would say, one sec. I think we have our core values up here somewhere. Yeah. There we go. So, champion open source tools, ship applied research, and nurture community.
I don't think so, did we?
Maybe. I thought we added one about like building a diverse community. Well, it's not on this page if we did.
Feels like something we should know, but
yeah, it does, doesn't it? In my defense, I'm a little distracted right now. Benson should have a video here. Love his comments. Office Hours with Benson. All right, I think that's a good signal that we're about ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining, Liam. I think this was really helpful. I hope folks really found this valuable, and if you're on the job market right now, believe in you, be bold, apply for it, take care of yourself. Drink water, I guess. I don't know, it's rough. Job searching is rough. So thanks so much for joining. We will be back tomorrow with paper reading. We're going to be continuing to read the Stochastic Parrots paper. And there is a podcast interview with the co-first author of that, Emily Bender, that went out last Wednesday. So that's also on our YouTube channel, or it's Rasa Chats is the podcast, wherever you get podcasts. Yeah, and then on Friday we'll be doing some live. We'll be joined for that if that's something you do. And I'll see you tomorrow. And thank you so much, Liam. I think this was really fun.
Thank you. I had fun. Thanks everyone for your questions.
I'll see you.